What is the most reliable engine you can get in a Super Duty right now? In my opinion, the most reliable engine that you can get in Super Duty is the 6.7 Power Stroke. And it's interesting because a lot of guys will go for the 7.3 looking for, the most reliable engine, the 7.3 liter gas over the 6.7. That's been a trend for a long time. A lot of people are just tired of the diesels and the amount of money that they can cost. Now, I think the tables have really turned in favor of the 6.7, although it is a more expensive option. That price is going to be a factor for sure for a lot of buyers, and it's a very legitimate factor when you think that from a business standpoint, many businesses cannot justify the $10,000 to $12,000 increase in price for a diesel. That being said, for the potential customer that is going to be looking for a vehicle from Ford, for them to say, I'm going to avoid the 6.7, not because of the cost, but because the 7.3 or the 6.8 is a more reliable option. I don't know if that's true. I think the 6.7 is the most reliable option that you can really get right now from Ford. Now, things were different when Ford had the 6.2, but you can no longer get that unless you're in the used market. Now, if you're willing to go into the used market purely on reliability alone, the 6.2 with the 6-speed transmission is going to be the king of reliability from Ford, or probably from any other manufacturer for that matter, because the way that engine is built and its track record really proves that that's the most reliable engine. It has the least amount of failures, the least amount of things that can go wrong. Now, when they came out with the 7.3 liter gas V8, I think in 2020, they really promoted it as a alternative to the diesel. And being that it's a pushrod, it was supposed to be more reliable. But I was a little bit skeptical of that. Like, what about a pushrod engine makes it more reliable than a comparable engine that has just overhead cams? Now, that being said, keep in mind that the 6.7 being a diesel also uses push rods as well, but it's still more reliable. So one of the things I think with the diesel is the push rod. Now, everything I say from here on is a little bit of speculation because I'm not exactly an engine builder. I know a little bit, but I'm not the most well-versed engine builder out there. I'm not even an engine builder at all, but I do know a little bit about it, and I've built an engine before, and I did take a class on it, so I do understand, some of the factors involved and some of the pros and cons with different engines. Now, the diesel being a pushrod engine, not as bad because it's a much lower revving engine. It has a lower red line, but pushrod engines don't typically do as well when they need to rev out because of valve float and all that stuff that's involved. Well, valve float is less of an issue with the diesel because it's not a high RPM engine. With the gas engines, they typically have to be higher RPM. They have to rev a little higher and work a little bit higher in the RPM range. They benefit from a gear ratio that lets the engine rev out a little longer or a little bit higher RPM. So a diesel, the 6.7 doesn't really have too many valve train issues, but the 7.3, for whatever reason, had so many freaking valve train issues, and it's certainly less reliable than the 6.2 that it replaced. And it's just, I don't know if I can say that we've all been lied to, but promises have been kind of broken, in my opinion, when they make it to be that this engine's going to be more reliable, and they actually say things like, we're going to a pushrod engine, it's simpler, it's more reliable. And at the end of the day, it's not more reliable, and it has way more failures and problems, particularly with the valve train, with the camshafts and the lifters and all that. Oh, this truck's stuck. Look at that. That's close. Ooh. Over the white lines. Look how far over those lines he is. But yeah, the risk, or the fact that you're talking about a higher revving engine, you might have a little more issues with valve float. But for whatever reason, the 7.3, I don't know if that's exactly the problem with the 7.3. It's a well-built engine, but it's not as well built as the 6.2. The 6.2, in my opinion, is a better design, even though it's an overhead camshaft design, which doesn't give you the benefits really of the overhead cam. So it's a little bit of waste of money, but you have less moving parts on your valve train, in the sense that you don't have the push rods to move around. It means that there's, in theory, it's a higher revving engine, and it has less issue with a valve float. Now, maybe what's going on with that 7.3 is not even related to valve float at all. It seems to be the engines that do a ton of idling that have a issue with the valve train. But how did you sell us on the idea that pushrod engines are so much better than overhead cam engines? They are better. They are better in the department of their size. They're smaller engines. They have smaller cylinder heads because they don't have camshafts on the cylinder heads, and they can be in more packages. They fit inside Corvettes and really exotic cars with a lot of power. They're smaller package motors, but they're not more reliable than overhead cam motors. So a little bit of a lie, I feel, toward the customer, but they are going to be more profitable for the manufacturer. They're going to be cheaper for the manufacturer to build them, and it's going to be more efficient for them to build them. So there's that. It can fit in more packages. But the idea that it's just more reliable simply because it's a pushrod engine, that's kind of a stretch, in my opinion. Also, the 6.2 is better designed because you can run a 6.2 V8 for a very long time and not really have to think about the maintenance on the spark plugs and all that. They had coil on plug ignition. They had a real good system. It's easily a 300,000 mile engine in the gasoline platform, and that's working miles. The 7.3, for whatever reason, well, for the reason of the fact that they removed a spark plug. The 6.2 has 2 spark plugs per cylinder, and they also put spark plug wires on the engine. So instead of having a coil right on the plug, you've got to run a spark plug wire from the coil to the plug. So they had issues with those at first. I think they've sorted that out. Then, the spark plugs, they're just not going to last as long because all of that spark and all of that combustion is now handled by one plug instead of 2. So a little bit shorter life on the spark plugs. You hear guys with the 7.3s having to do tune-ups sooner than they had to do it with the 6.2. Now the 7.3 gives you, a little more power, simply for the fact that the engine is just a little bit bigger. But it would have been better if they just built a 7.3 liter V8 on the same platform as the 6.2. That would have been a superior motor. Nonetheless, they did it, and it is done, and it is getting better. They're starting to really work out the bugs, and it does drive a little bit better from the drivability and the torque and all that. It's a little bit better, but it's hard on oil. Like, it just, for whatever reason, it's just hard on oil. Probably because just simply the fact that the cylinders are bigger, and it's just getting a lot more, I guess, blow by. I don't know. So the 7.3 could probably benefit from having like a gapless piston ring or something like that, or something with that engine. That engine from Ford, that engine from Ford is a work in progress. They're still working out the bugs, but they've managed to work out a lot. It's not the worst engine ever built. It is getting better. It is slowly but surely getting better, but it's just interesting. One of the things that's interesting to me is that we've all been told that these V8, the old school V8, it's going to be better than the V6s are coming out. Well, Ford came out with their 3.5 EcoBoost, and it's more reliable than their 5.0 for a while. I think the 5.0 is finally catching back up, but when that 3.5 EcoBoost came out, they had some oil consumption issues with the 5 liter. It was just not doing well with the oil. It's just drinking oil. It turns out these compact turbocharged engines are the way to go on the half-ton world. Look at the GM engine lineup. You got the 6.2 having all kinds of issues, and their 4-cylinder turbo is doing well. It's not having as many issues. So it's very interesting to see that this idea that these V8s were going to be so reliable, turns out that they're not, because they have to drop other technologies on top of the existing V8 technology, like going to a thinner oil and playing with the oil pumps with less pressure to try to save fuel. They're not as reliable as the V6s, which tend to run a little thicker oil, the 530, maybe even thicker. It's just the turbocharged 4-cylinders seem to be doing well. Now that's a pretty reliable platform, and the fact that new machining and technologies and stuff like that have gotten a lot more consistent with these turbochargers. It used to be back in the day, you get a turbocharged 4-cylinder in the 90s, wouldn't be that reliable because a turbo, how precise is that and how long is that turbo going to last? Nowadays, change your oil and keep up on your maintenance, your turbos are fine. So what a twist. All the people that think the V8s are going to be the way to go for reliability, no, these turbocharged V6s seem to have an advantage with the reliability for whatever reason. So it's a real twist. It's a real twist of events that V6s and 4-cylinder turbocharged, these power dense engines do seem to be more reliable. You certainly don't hear about them in the news quite as much. There is no class action lawsuits against EcoBoost right now. It's just, it seems like the way to go if you're in a half-ton world. And then with the heavy duties, these diesels, I mean, the emissions is annoying. I haven't personally had any problems with my emissions. It is a problem there, but the overall platform, there's so much pressure on these companies to have a good diesel, where the gas is almost like a secondary thought. All their money in engineering is in their diesels, and it's in their V6 turbocharged engines. The V8s, they're still, good V8s, but the V8 gas engines, they're still good, but not getting the reliability, in my opinion. But comment below. Let me know your thoughts. I'm about to get some fuel. See you in the next video. Over and out.